I realized early on that when I was very young and asking about sex, it was the one thing that people wouldn't give me a straightforward an answer for. I think that sex is disgusting and we should fight to keep it that way.
And we both know like how much time and non-fantasy work that is required to cultivate long-term DS dynamics.
Now there's this like whole fetishization around the step industry. I don't know what to call it. And
this is not incest industry.
Yes, exactly. We're sugarcoating incest. When we lose access to these websites, it is only making people more vulnerable to trafficking. Sex workers are doing some of the most ingenious hacks around the way that censorship happens on social media platforms. And I love turning someone into a tool for my pleasure. Like if I have my way at all times and am doing what I want, like you are merely a tool for my pleasure to use or not use.
Welcome back to Uncensored Tomie fans. Today's guest is a powerful force at the intersection of pleasure, politics, and liberation. Danielle Blunt is a dominatrix, researcher, activist, and cultural worker whose work has reshaped how we understand sex, power, and survival. She is the co-founder of Hacking and Hustling, a nationally recognized collective disrupting state surveillance, digital policing, and tech-facilitated violence against sex workers. Her work sits at the crossroads of sex work, public health, technology, and abolition, centering lived experiences over institutional narratives. Through sex-positive education, public scholarship, and community-based research, Danielle doesn't just talk about pleasure. She frames it as resistance, strategy, and a tool for collective liberation. Danielle Blunt, welcome to Uncensored. I'm so glad to have you on the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. I will issue one correction, is that I am anti-pleasure and all for torture.
Okay, explain that a little bit. Let's talk about that.
I feel like there is so much talk about sex positivity, and I think that sex is disgusting and we should fight to keep it that way. I think it's really important to not like fully sanitize sex and to not only focus on pleasure. And I think especially as dominatrices, it feels really important to remember that like that pleasure is not the only route to self-understanding or self-fulfillment.
Yeah, I think for the general public, that kind of framework can be very difficult to understand. But it does remind me of this Umberto Eco quote where he talks about how like beauty is finite, but ugliness is infinite, like God, and that's how I feel about this work that we do, where we're turning the relation between like pain, pleasure, shame, ugliness on its head oftentimes. What was your journey like into that kind of understanding?
I definitely was always kinky and definitely always identified as a pervert. And I think I was really interested in the tension between pleasure, desire, and discomfort. And so some of my earliest explorations were around like heavy tease and denial and how long can you prolong the pleasure and get away with it. And my answer was just like always more and more and more.
Let's rewind a little bit and talk about your origin story. What did you learn early on from family, culture, or society about sex and desire that led to where you are now?
Yeah, my family was actually really open about sex and sexuality. And so I would ask a ton of questions. And I think I realized early on that when I was very young and asking about sex, it was the one thing that people wouldn't give me a straightforward an answer for. And so I realized that it would make people uncomfortable when I asked. And I was like, well, what's on the other side of that discomfort? There must be something really, really interesting. And so I kept asking and asking and asking until I got this information. And my mom specifically was very forthright and really open and really wanted to give me like a positive sex education. And I think like that open line of communication made made things go really well and increased my interest. But it also, the fact that people didn't really want to answer me made it seem like this taboo thing. And that once I acquired this information about sex was, I use it as social capital, and it became this form of power that I would use like on the playground of like, did you know about this thing? And so I think from like a very early age I was very interested in the relationship between sex and power.
Mm-hmm. And you trained at a old guard BDSM Chateau at 18. Tell us about the Chateau and the training process. I'm so curious about that.
Yeah, I found this BDSM training chateau because I was having sex with this guy, and apparently he was talking to his friend about it. And this
Nice.
chateau, yeah, was being spoken about. And the friend contacted me being like, yo, these weird people came to my human sexuality class, and I think they're your kind of people and you need to go check it out. And I did, and I went there like every 2 weeks in college for the weekend and for parties. It was very old guard leather and um like I was exploring all of my sexuality, all of the BDSM world, all of this leather space, and would earn my leather. So I started off more as a submissive, even though I was interested primarily in domination. And I earned leather boots, I earned my leathers, and would dom more and more in this space. And it's I have a really complicated relationship with this space because it's definitely cult adjacent, which
Mm.
I personally really liked. And I think that because of my interest in power dynamics, I was interested in some of the more like manipulative things that were happening there. And I think it took me much longer into establishing broader community outside of this space to realize that's not what everyone was interested in their explorations.
Mm-hmm. In what ways was it culty? What did you guys have like rituals? Like what kind of cult is
I
this?
mean like cult, like social isolation, and
Ah,
like it can only
mm-hmm.
operate if you don't have contact with other community, and like kind of preys on people who don't have strong social ties. And I think because of the familial upbringing that I was talking to you about, I had those strong social ties, and it was actually like half an hour away from where I lived, so it never felt like I was too far away from what tethered me to
Mm-hmm.
the rest of my life. And so I think because of some of those resources that I had, familial resources and relationships, I wasn't taken in as deep, and I was able to get away and develop my own relationships outside of the space. But I think um, it it definitely had a lot of abuse of power, and I think I learned a lot about the use of power through the misuse of power at that place.
Mm. Yeah, I was going to ask you, like, what are some valuable lessons you learned in that space, and what did you later have to unlearn? And it sounds like this is part of that, right? This unlearning of power being used in a way that is abusive, and I think a lot of times in BDSM, that line can be a little fine. So how do you kind of navigate that in your practice now?
Yeah, I mean it's an interesting question. I part of what I loved about the space was the dedication, the devotion, and the ritual, and having like a home that was being serviced by like 4 or 5 submissives at any given time, and having them trained to know what you like, how you like it, and the idea of like anticipatory service. So like when you want something, it's there. And I think that type of lifestyle domination is what I've taken from that place of where my desires and my fantasies kind of go to, of having that type of service deeply embedded into every aspect of my life. Like I'm a lifestyle dom through and through. Like I want perfect service at all times. I am demanding. I will train you up to my standards. And I think for unlearning, I don't know how much of it was unlearning. I was always pretty wary of the space and didn't get like too lost in the sauce or like too lost in what they were trying to preach, you know, when you would walk in and they'd be like, welcome home, I would be like, I have another place to go. Like, I don't feel that way here. But I think my personal interests were around more edge play and manipulation and what as both like a switch. I trained as a switch. So I was interested in the way the headmaster would try and manipulate me, and to see his power being used in this way that I could kind of butt up against. And I don't think I did too much of that without negotiating it, but I do think that I learned to add into my negotiations and try and play with people, especially in my personal life, who do like that edgier play of being pushed into encountering your limits and being pushed into encountering your boundaries and being curious about what is at the other side of my desire, what is right there at that edge, and what's on the other side of it.
Mm-hmm. I would love to know if there's like a specific story around those manipulation tactics and the way you maneuvered around it with negotiation for anyone who's listening who might be encountering this and who might need to navigate it because it's a very complicated situation.
Yeah, I had a lovely conversation. I also have a podcast, Can I Be Blunt? And I interviewed one of the former house slaves of the house who was there at the same time as me, and we overlapped, and we've talked a lot about that. And I think it's like always having another person to talk about your dynamic with feels really important to me. It's something that I tell all of my submissives, including clients, that I really encourage people to have a kink aware therapist, if especially if they're not out in other aspects of their life. Because while I like being like the high authority and always being right and correct, I think it's really important to have a safer person in your life to kind of counterbalance that you can talk with about things, so that if something isn't going right, you have tools and resources to be able to talk about it or get out of a situation that you shouldn't be in the first place.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, absolutely. Um, let's talk about edge play
Okay.
for people who, because you've been mentioning it over and over again. I would love to hear about one of your favorite edge play stories and walk us through the beginning to the end of the scene, exactly how you felt, what did you do, really paint a picture of that scene.
I can do that. I think edge play is so interesting because what is an edge for someone might not be an edge for someone else. And so it's so personal. So I feel like there's no one concrete definition of what edge play is. What someone might find edgy, someone might find incredibly vanilla. And so I also think with this question, I want to think about what feels edgy to me personally, because I think when we talk about edge play, we often think about what feels edgy for the sub. And personally, like as I've been exploring BDSM for over 18 years, I'm really curious about like what feels edgy for me at this point, and what
Mm,
feels like I'm approaching my limit of what I feel not safe in doing with someone else, but like hits that like deep part of me of being like, is this wrong? Does this feel wrong? Does this feel bad? And coming up to that edge in myself.
mm,
I've had this fantasy for like the last 10 years that I've never been able to act out, where I would go with a group of girlfriends to like a bar on Wall, like in the financial district or something like that. And we would just have one drink in the middle of the table. And in the middle of the table, there would be one drink, and we would wait for someone to hit on us. And we would offer them the drink, and we'd be like, you're welcome to have this drink and sit with us, but beware, there's something in the drink. The drink is laced with something. And I have a suspicion that like 90% of men would drink the drink. I don't know.
Oh, 99% of
99%
men.
would drink the drink.
The moment it's a
And
challenge.
yeah, it's a challenge. The challenge is you'll drink the drink and we can do whatever we want with you when we get home. And then I just have
Invite
like
me
this,
in.
yes, yes, let's go out. I have this debaucherous fantasy of like in the hotel room, just like throwing cash and just like taking everything and like robbing this man blind, and like taking photos and like only having that as like the only memory. And I
Yeah.
had this one submissive who was like, well, what are you into? Like, what do you want? And we've been playing together for many years. He's a devoted submissive, and we've done some like lighter forced intox play and Femdom. And I told him about this fantasy, and he's like, that sounds incredibly hot. Let's do it. And so I got together with a friend and we went out to dinner, and we the forced intox was with not illegal substances, I will say for posterity. And we had some drinks. And as we were drinking, now I don't drink, so I remained very sober. Um, we proceeded with a little seduction game, and he got more and more inebriated, and he decided to take the bait and come home with us. And we it was one of the most fun sessions of my life, and it definitely was like incredibly exciting and hit on some of those edges for me, because just the pacing of the forced intox was faster than what we had done before. And I think especially when you're playing around with substances, you don't actually know what there's this element of the unknown that comes into play. And so while we were only playing with alcohol and playing within limits of what I was told that he's drank before safely, um, the night ended up, and in the morning, he did not have a memory of the evening and was very disoriented. And so it almost became edgier after the fact, because when I left for the night, he was like, "Oh my God, I love you." He was like covered in. We like took all the money. It was like my dream. I was in the cab home with my friend, and I just looked at her and I was like, that was the best session of my life. Like, that was the most fun that I've
Mm.
had in such a long time. And in the morning, my submissive was really disoriented and in a very, very real way. And I think that's one of the risks with edge play like this, is that, we had talked about what I knew how much he drinks when he goes out with friends. I knew his approximate body weight, but when I left, I had no idea that he wouldn't remember because he was so lucid at the time. When I think of edge play, it also felt edgier after the fact, because there were so many elements of the unknown, and I feel really grateful to be able to play with people that I trust to do the repair work that's necessary when something like that comes up in a scene,
Mhm.
because it's a really exciting form of play, not just forced intox, but like any type of approaching the edge of a boundary. And I think that it really requires someone to be able to come back with you if it goes a little bit too far, or if an element of the unknown comes into play, or something like arises from you that you couldn't have negotiated to begin with because you didn't know that that was either on the table, or if something psychologically comes up. um, and I think that's part of what feels so exciting about edge play, is that it feels genuinely risky. And I think all intimacy is risky. And I think playing with edge play in that capacity uh, can create really deep bonds and really push yourself. And I think that is one scene that really pushed me as a dominant as well.
Mhm. Yeah, I've had one very similar uh forced intox scene where the sub didn't remember things the day after. And the feeling of like, oh, did I do something right or wrong, right? Like
Yeah.
that unknown, like it's in between. Yes, he consented to it, but he was out completely. The trust needed to do the aftercare, and yeah, again, like the unknown repair work of like consent is um not this like line that people draw, because it's a lot more fluid in reality when we're not always like who 100% knows our identity to figure out those lines, right? And for me, edge play is like we're discovering that together now. We're discovering like what those the contours of our identity is, and maybe not even contours. I kind of imagine it like amoebas touching
Well, I
each
feel
other,
like
and then
it
yeah, and the
emerges.
yes, yeah, and sort of like the line between like you and them kind of blurs in moments like that.
Totally.
What did that repair work look like for you? For me, I needed a lot of reassurance from my sub that he was okay
Yeah,
after.
I needed, well, yeah, and I think it, regardless of, right, like you were talking about consent in a specific way, right? Like you can have like yes, no consent works for very particular types of sex that you're having, but if you are playing with this like in between area, we don't always know ourselves. We are somewhat opaque to ourselves and to others, and there is not always a way to communicate the extent of our desires if we're not aware of them ourselves. And so I think some of the repair work looked like um, reminding him what happened, um, extra aftercare, um, and like leaning into the 4+ years of the relationship that that hadn't happened in. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it was a lot of talking and a lot of aftercare and a lot of like very genuine concern. Like it doesn't feel good for me when someone doesn't have a good time, like I was like on this like super fucking high and just like came down to reality of being like, oh shit, like whether or not I intended to hurt this person, they are, very deregulated and like not where I would want someone to be after such a fun scene. And so I think it does
Mm-hmm.
take some work to like make sure you're both on the same page. And like we've played since then, and I feel like the play has gotten deeper too because there is this element of trust that we can repair from that, as well as go deeper because like now I have more data and more information so that I can like tailor the experience so that there isn't necessarily that hard of a wall that's being hit at the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We both have long-term submissives, and I think we should only do edge play with long-term submissives. And we both know like how much time and non-fantasy work is that is required to cultivate long-term DS dynamics. Um, Tell us about when you know that a sub will be in your life long term. How do you determine that? And what does that building and training look like for you? I know where the whales are. They're on IWantClips. For over a decade, IWantClips has been the home for big spenders and the top earners in Fetish. I've been on the platform for years, and trust me, it delivers. Join today and use the code MXTOMIE for 15% off your entire cart. And if you're an artist, you'll get 90% revenue share for your first 3 months. 90%. That is better than any other clip site platform out there. Thank you to IWantClips for sponsoring this episode of Uncensored.
On my fan sites, I really try and get to know individuals. And I've had one person be like, ma'am, I'm just trying to jerk off. And I was like, oh, so sorry. Here's a clip. But I'm like, I think because I come from such like lifestyle background, I really am interested in the psychology of BDSM and developing relationships and developing I value service in all of my BDSM relationships. Like not all clients will do service for me, but in my longer term ones, they very often are doing elements of service with me. And so I have a training protocol of following like a set of tasks and devotional tasks that show me that someone can focus and keep attention. I feel like is weeds out like 95% of individuals. And I think once someone is consistently doing the smaller tasks, I will add on to the load until they're I do progressive overload in my in my submissive
It's
training.
like weight
Yes,
training.
it's just like weight training and just like dog training, to be honest. You increase duration, you increase distance, you increase the difficulty of the task in slow increments to make sure that you're still getting the quality of service that you want. But I think it's really consistency is one of the main factors for me that I really look for in a submissive, and prioritization of my pleasure. So, right, is someone talking to me about what their fantasies are, or is someone asking how they can serve me? If I ask someone to write me a list of 10 things they can do to serve me, and it's blocking myself in chastity, myself in the wearing panties for you, you know, and none of it is like sending you your good morning coffee, writing down a list of all of my skills that I have that I can offer to you, figuring out what like resources, both financial and skill based, that I can offer to you to make your life easier. You know, it's like very different. And I think there's some people who are interested in just sexual forms of submission and role play, and there's people who are interested in lifestyle dynamics and developing and cultivating DS dynamics. And I think it's pretty easy based on, are they still interested in doing this if their dick isn't hard?
Absolutely. Um, do you have a favorite DS dynamic right now?
I am not masochistic enough to answer that for you on camera and deal with all of the repercussions of that.
I
Do you?
loved I'm going to like requote what Lucy Sweetco said, which was like, none of them deserve to know which one's the most special to
Yes,
me.
I love that.
There's not they all need to be like a little bit cautious and a little
Always
bit
be on your
nervous
toes.
that they're
Yeah.
gonna get kicked. Exactly. What is the difference between a long-term DS dynamic and femdom GFE for you?
Well, I feel like they're
Because
two,
they mm-hmm.
I feel like it can be two very different things. I think, well, I did want to chat about femdom GFE because I feel like there is this idea that dominatrices don't like to get fucked, and I'm sure that's true for some people, but it's not true for me. And I like using my submissive in all capacities. I like using my body in all capacities, and like sure, there are definitely like dynamics where that is not what I'm looking for or what I'm interested in, and what not what my submissive is going to get out of me. But like I am a woman who loves sex and sexuality. And so having that, using the entirety of my sexuality as a tool for domination, like going back to the start of this conversation of thinking about sex and power, I really never understood this idea that, you know, the dominatrix is completely untouchable. Like, what if the dom wants to get like, and
What
there's
if she
like,
wants an orgasm? Like,
yeah,
is she
why is she
not
focusing
allowed?
on your edging you for out? Like, not that I don't love tease and denial, but like, what it like,
Yeah,
I,
what about
what about me? What the
yeah. Yeah, also like this only applies to like femme presenting doms in sort of like male, like, you know, whatever. I don't even know the term for male doms, like men dominating like a woman. Sex is
You're like, this
always
is so
involved.
gross. I can't even think. I can't even
Yeah,
think of
and
the
I'm like,
word.
what's the terminology? Like that is always the case, right? Like
Yes.
doming them sexually, but it doesn't apply the other way around. And I think it's really rooted in this I think still in this like idea that chastity and virginity is like the most important thing
Or this
in a
idea too
woman.
that penetration can like ruin someone. That penetration, yeah, it's exactly that. That penetration is an inherently submissive act. So, right, the submissive wants to get fucked because that's what makes them feel submissive. The submissive wants to be feminized because being feminized is inherently submissive, even though they're worshiping a femdom. It is a very specific type of
Mm-hmm.
feminization that they're seeking to like enter this submissive headspace. And I really like in my day, like I am a lifestyle dom and I'm a professional dominatrix, and like I love a good scene, I love a good performance, I love like world building and creating a scene for my submissive. But like in my like day to day, I am uninterested in someone else's pleasure. Like I am interested in my pleasure and my pleasure exclusively, and I love turning someone into a tool for my pleasure. Like if I have my way at all times and am doing what I want, like you are merely a tool for my pleasure to use or not use and to take advantage of and to facilitate my pleasure in any way. And so I don't know that there's necessarily a difference. Like all of my partners are in life are submissive to me, and um my like longer term DS dynamics I think maybe have more heavy protocol than Femdom GFE does, where it's
Mm.
maybe more like the little things, you know,
Mm-hmm.
like the way that we're fucking, or the things that I say while we're fucking, or the way I take your credit card to pay for dinner, or like these littler things rather than like what you imagine happening in a dungeon. And I think
Mm.
Femdom GFE gives me space to play with my like raw sexuality as a vehicle for power exchange rather than relying on some of the like classic aesthetics and classic tools of BDSM in the dungeon instead of limiting myself into that arena. Out of the
Mm.
dungeon and
Mm-hmm.
into the light.
Yeah, I think that differentiation is really apt, I think. I sometimes joke that there's Femdom GFE and then long-term DS dynamics is Femdom GFW. Wait, no, W, like girlfriend experience, like wife experience,
Yes.
where the sex has kind of like fallen to the side,
I
and it's
love
really
that.
about all these other things now. Like even you're married,
Yeah.
you're married at this point. Like me, you do both digital and in-person work. And on the digital side, we're always navigating censorship and the threat of deplatforming, which have immense financial and career consequences. Platforms often claim censorship is about safety and trust, but from your research, uh, who is actually being protected and who is being exploited in these spaces?
That's a great question, especially with bills like Kosa being revived from the dead. And I think that no one is being protected from losing access to resources. I think it's incredibly important to understand that the needs of the people that these bills purport to protect, like trafficking survivors or people who are in very precarious positions, aren't always there's overlap between people who do sex work, people who are being trafficked, people who are in precarious positions, people who aren't making enough money and have poor labor conditions. And so when we lose access to these websites, it is only making people more vulnerable to trafficking because people are losing access to resources that they use to take care of themselves, to take care of their families. And so I would say that no one is being protected by these other than the protection of like white patriarchy and like nuclear family. And I would also like to say that most violence happens within the nuclear family. And that is really where we should be looking and focusing attention so that everyone has resources to stay safe.
Yeah, and in the same line of online censorship, you study financial discrimination against sex workers. What are banks, payment processors, and algorithms doing right now that are impacting people in our industry?
Yeah, we're just actually finishing up. Some of my researchers and I are finishing up a second study where we collected data from like 400 sex workers about their experiences being deplatformed from banking institutions and financial technologies like Cash App, Venmo, PayPal, and things like that. And it's just like any resource. The less resources you have, the less choices you have, and the decisions that you're making, the less choices you have, and the type of labor that you're doing. People are losing access to their banking and having to rely on third parties, which makes people more vulnerable to trafficking and labor exploitation. People are losing bank accounts and unable to pay rent and having to move back in with abusers. People are losing access to their banking and not having access to their banking. It is a resource that I think a lot of people in a lot of communities take as like evergreen accessible that is just like any platform that sex workers use, you never know when it's going to be taken away, when you're going to have to shift or pivot to another one to keep yourself and your resources and your community safe.
Mm-hmm. And what are some ways that sex workers can keep ourselves safe with the precarity of different platforms?
I think there are a ton of great YouTube videos on the Hacking Hustling website. EFF has a ton of great digital security videos, as well as so does the Digital Defense Fund. Um, I think that I think it's really difficult. I was talking to someone the other day about losing an Instagram account, and I asked if, it was on the same, they lost their personal account, and so that, which they use for mutual aid and stuff like that. And so I had asked if they like had the same IP address, the same device. And it's not everyone is able to take all of these digital security steps to make sure that identities aren't like overlapping in these ways. And so I think that the advice is really variable based on people's circumstances, and I think that it's really important to threat model to figure out what you're trying to protect, so you can figure out how you're trying to protect it, and with what resources you have can you put towards protecting your personal information and your identity.
Mm-hmm. And also, like at this point, many content creators are forced to speak in code,
Oh my
right?
god.
Like we have our spy. There's so much code around what we do, changing words, censoring ourselves, tiptoeing around language just to avoid losing monetization, being deplatformed. Um, and I think it's always really interesting where when we have censorship at this scale around sexuality, they end up mutually shaping each other. I'm thinking about how,
Yes.
like online now, um, gym wear is fetishized because like latex gets, flagged.
But then more
My
people
one of my
started wearing latex because lingerie was getting flagged, and
yes,
then it catches
exactly.
up.
Yes, or like censored content, like pixelated content now is a fetish for a lot of subs
Mm-hmm.
because, showing too much nudity isn't allowed. I'm also thinking about, JOYs where even the act of counting down now, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is is fetishized. What do you think about what's your perspective on all these shifts? I think it's really interesting and it's such a it's so life-giving that like yes the perverts will always make it through no matter what gets thrown at us. Like we're going back to the Victorian age where showing an ankle is now like the sexiest thing you
Right?
can do.
I know. It
Mm-hmm.
really is, it's so interesting. Oh, I thought it was also interesting just that the name of the show is Uncensored. And one of the notes you gave me coming into this podcast that if I say anything that's not appropriate for YouTube, it will be cut out. And so I think even like with the
For
platforms,
Patreon, for
oh,
Patreon.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So go to Patreon, go to Tomie's Patreon so you can hear it. But I think like, is some of the ways that we're censored is like completely invisibilized, and other ways is so visible that it becomes part of culture in this way that I think sex work has always innovated, and I think we're seeing it happen at such a rapid progression. Like I was thinking of this like very viral meme of like, hey step bro, and I'm like, this comes from porn, and the reason that it comes from porn is that you can't just say brother because payment processors won't process that payment. So now there's this like whole fetishization around the step industry. I don't know what to call it. um, and
The this is not incest
yes,
industry.
exactly. We're sugarcoating incest role play. But like I think people don't understand where it comes from. Or like when we're talking like athleisure is less likely to get flagged on social media as adult content, and I saw this one creator kind of talking down to doms specifically who were marketing as more vanilla, and I responded and I was like, you realize that this shift in marketing is because people are being censored and their content's not being seen and people are trying to make money, and that shift of people trying to um which has happened all throughout histories, all since sex work has been criminalized, sex workers have shifted and adapted to be able to continue to make money. And I think we're seeing it happen now online so fast that the trends are changing so fast. I think sex workers are doing some of the most ingenious hacks around the way that censorship happens on social media platforms. And I think anthropologists are going to have a field day in like 15 years studying the impact that it has on fetishes. And I think like the shift to trad, I think that's what we're seeing in the shift to like the trad wife fetish too, is because of both
Mm-hmm.
fascism and the fascist censorship that we're seeing.
Mm-hmm. I have a Dom friend, Louisa, who's going to be on the podcast next month. She's like, I'm buying all Zimmerman now, and I'm fetishizing like Upper East Side white woman wear
I think
in
it's the
my
move.
sessions.
I think it's the move. I think there's going to be heavy trad stuff, and I think I right like because that's how fetishes are formed, or what one of the ways that fetishes are formed is what you see that you find arousing at an earlier age. And if people aren't seeing porn, if people can't access porn, what they're going to be fetishizing, sure, is like also that, because woo, like that's exciting, but it's going to be athleisure, it's going to be travel bloggers, it's going to be the gym girlies who are building their booties on Instagram who aren't being censored in the same way. And you
Mm-hmm.
see that shift with content creators taking that Zimmerman path.
Yes. I was on OFTV recently, and like the three videos we did was a travel vlog where I like went around London eating normal food, a Hot Ones parody where I make a sub eat hot wings, and the third one is like a comedy show where like comedians try to make a dom laugh,
Oh
right?
god.
And I'm just like, are like these are the ways like we're trying to re-innovate. I'm like
Right, and both of us
gentrify.
having
I'm
podcasts. Like
yeah, I'm like gentrifying the YouTube space as much as I can. And yes, yeah, this podcast too, it started because I was like, okay, I need a workaround for advertising
yeah.
because my Instagram's been taken down. I don't know how many times at this point. Um I Twitter's shadow banned. I need a way to talk about what I'm doing that I love so much and I want to like reach people, and like this is a format
Yeah.
now, and I'm
But
so curious about how it's going to shift.
it's the yeah, we're good. It's so annoying too. Part of me is just like I never wanted to be a content creator, and like I envy my elders who retired when they were able to just place a quarterly ad in like DDI and just like do one photo shoot a year and like have no
Uh-huh.
idea how to handle an Instagram account or a deletion or like a YouTube channel, and like don't know what TikTok is. Like God bless. Like but the constant adaptation that is necessary, it frustrates me too, because I'm like, just like let me work. Like I enjoy what I do. I shouldn't have to enjoy what I do to be able to do it. But why do I need a podcast? Why do I need to be an influencer? Why do I have to be branding as if I'm not a hooker to be able to do sex work? It's infuriating.
Hopefully, I'm really hoping things change so that, we can just like advertise for in-person sessions and keep it simple. Let's switch gears and lighten things up a little bit. This quick fire segment is presented by IWantClips.com. Short answers only. First thing that comes to mind. Ready?
Let's go.
Okay. What is your favorite clip of all time?
I think my succumbing to mommy protocol would be my favorite clip because it gives people a good taste of what I'm into and how to do it.
Okay, love that. What's a myth of DOMs that you're tired of?
We don't like to get
Yeah. One book that changed how you think about intimacy.
God, this is a hard one. I'm going to say Rape of the Mind, which is about brainwashing techniques.
Adding that to my list. What's a boundary you wish you learned sooner?
Charge for everything.
What word feels erotic to you?
I'm going to say mommy.
Go to safe word.
No. I use no most of the time.
I know where the whales are. They're on IWantClips. For over a decade, IWantClips has been the home for big spenders and the top earners in fetish. I've been on the platform for years, and trust me, it delivers. Join today and use the code MXTOMIE for 15% off your entire cart. And if you're an artist, you'll get 90% revenue share for your first 3 months. 90%. That is better than any other clip site platform out there. Thank you to IWantClips for sponsoring this episode of Uncensored. Thanks for watching this episode of Uncensored with MX Tomie. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you're a very good sub. And don't forget to follow me on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and Patreon, and all the other apps that I'm on. I'll see you on the next one.